All right, so people that are listening, we thank you for listening, first of all. Whether you're listening to us on the radio stations or on the podcasting sites, thanks so much. Podcasting people, please like, subscribe, and share this interview. Very important interview about a woman and her family that have been through the ringer. Henrietta Simoes here on Firebreathinrob. She's speaking about her son, Victor, that died from the COVID-19 vaccine. Henrietta, thanks so much for spreading the word on this important subject. We're very sorry about what happened, but you bringing this up is keeping not only your son's story alive, but the story of both people that have been injured by these shots in general alive. We need to keep doing that. So thanks again, Henrietta.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So a lot of this is just going to be you firing away as far as the story goes, Henrietta. And with that, I'm going to have you start off and just as we start the conversation, just tell us a little bit about your son Victor before the vaccine, and then we'll get into that in just a moment.
Well, Victor was really a wonderful son. And, I always said he was like, when he was 4, he was going on 40, super responsible. He was a top graduate of his high school. As a matter of fact, one of the things he did when his first year of college was he set up his own scholarship for his alma mater. And for 16 years, he gave, a very modest sum of money to his high school seniors. And when he died, 3 of his friends decided to continue that scholarship. So it's still in existence, the Victor Simoes Scholarship for the future. He went to Boston College. He was an honors student there. He graduated, worked at JP Morgan in Manhattan for a while, and then he decided to go for his MBA at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. He decided to stay when he graduated in Chicago because he and one of his peers decided to set up to do a startup for breast cancer. And they had gotten the idea from a doctor or whatever, and they worked on that. He also, like within a year of that startup, also with this other person, did one for orthopedic devices. Both of these companies are still in existence. And, it was a great learning experience for him. He then once, at one point after being there for 5 years, decided he wanted to do something different. And he managed to get a job working as a level 7 senior manager at Amazon in Seattle. So he loved the job. It was very challenging. He was in charge of fees for the world, not the United States. And he and his girlfriend had been working during the pandemic remotely. So they went to Florida for a while, stayed at my mother's condo. They went to they were in, couple of different states, but ultimately they went to Seattle so that they could decide where they would want to live once he couldn't work remotely anymore, just to scout out the neighborhoods and see, where that he wanted to live. So he was probably there 2.5 months, again, working mostly remotely. And he went, and then, this was in April. He was the last in the family to get the vaccine because he was the only one that didn't have something. My 90-year-old parents, were the first. We're in our his parents, myself and my husband, were in our 60s. He had a brother and a sister that have minor issues, but something that put them, ahead of him. So he got the vaccine. Even though we were sort of skeptical here and there, we're from New York, and New York, it was crazy. And he saw everything that was going on with, Cuomo every day coming up with all the different, this many people died, this many people died. So there was a lot of fear. And even though he was a super bright guy, I think we all lost our critical thinking skills.
Yes. Right.
And so and the other thing was that they kept saying, do it for grandma. So, my children were afraid of, oh my God, if, my husband goes to Costco and he brings it back and we get it and we go visit grandma. So that whole grandma thing, even though it's all a false, was played on our minds because as I said, we just lost our critical thinking abilities. As smart as he was, the fear took over. So anyway, he got the vaccine on April 20th. On April 26th, he texted me that he had a bad headache for a few days. And I think that's something that a lot of people get with the vaccine. And I said to him, do you think it's the vaccine? He said, I don't know. Maybe it's bad sleep. I don't know. Then on the night of May 5th, he was fine. He was dancing with his girlfriend in their apartment. As a matter of fact, I have the video because it's probably the only time she let him videotape, or do anything, because he hated social media, and she didn't put it on, but he said, and they went out to dinner, and that night he didn't feel well. He had severe stomach issues and pain. I guess he went to bed. They went to bed, and at some point early morning, he woke her up. He was already dressed. He had called 911 because he was experiencing chest pain and jaw numbness. And he said to her, I'm not right. I need to get checked out. I'm going to the hospital. There, the medics are downstairs. So he went down. He came back for his mask, went back down. And, she followed him, so she got dressed. So by that point, he was already sitting on the bench outside the building. They were taking his blood pressure. She arrived and he said, oh, this is my girlfriend. And upon saying that, he just collapsed and became unresponsive. They put him to the ground. They worked on him. They did whatever they could. They took him in the ambulance to the hospital, continuing to work on him. They intubated him. They got to the hospital. And this all transpired very quickly because the time of death was like 3:15 a.m., but he called around 1:30, around that time. I don't have the exact time. So it all happened very quickly. And so the ER doctor, when he came out to speak to his girlfriend, who said, did he have the vaccine? Because the doctor thought he had a pulmonary embolism, because that was one of the early, did an autopsy because he was in Washington State, and given the way how he had passed away, not in a hospital, they were required to do an autopsy. And the autopsy showed he had an aortic dissection. We spoke to the
So hold on, can we just stop for just a second? Henrietta, I'm sorry. Can we just stop for a second? I just want you to tell the viewers what that is.
Aortic dissection?
Yes, please.
An aortic dissection, the aorta is the vein, I guess, not the vein, it's bigger than that comes out of the heart. And there was a tear. And if it tears, it's very dangerous. And, if the blood starts to seep out and tears the rest of it, then you die pretty quickly, pretty easily. Some dissections are slow. And if you catch it in time, over the course of 2 or 3 days, you can save the person. My son had an acute dissection. It happened very quickly. So the tear, just cause the blood to, seep out into the heart sac and kind of squeeze the heart, and that's what happened. So, some of the things that can cause aortic dissections, sometimes you're genetically prone to it. If you have a lot of high blood pressure, consistent, if there's an aneurysm. The pathologist said his heart was healthy. He did not see evidence of high blood pressure. My son never had high blood pressure, medication. He said he did not have an aneurysm. So there was no, you can have a dissection without it, but a lot of times that is something you'll see. Aneurysms can lead to ruptures and then dissections. And sometimes it's a genetic thing. So he suspected that he says, maybe you should check out his genetics. So he sent out his DNA for testing at the university, one of the universities there. And the panel came back negative. There was nothing. He didn't have Marfan's. He didn't have Ehlers-Danlos. He did not have any of the connective tissue disorders that could lead to a dissection. Subsequent to that, in the months that followed, the whole family was checked for genetics, and nobody in the family had, my daughter, my son, my husband, myself, we didn't have anything that was clinically relevant as far as dissections. So I said, okay, so now what? Because he had an autopsy, I was fortunate because in those days they weren't doing autopsies. They were trying to get people not to do autopsies. And, of course, if you don't have an autopsy, you don't know the real cause of death, and had he not had an autopsy, we would have assumed it was a heart attack or something. So we had his blood stored and his tissue stored, and so we did have we had a top researcher at a top university look at his blood serum and study it, and it came back with like 42 different charts of different things that they looked at. He had an exceedingly high number of inflammatory markers. One of them, and I had done so much research on all of this, and of course, I'm not a scientist and I forget half the stuff, but one of them was IL-6. And IL-6 is something that you don't have a dissection without it. And it causes vascular inflammation, which leads to vascular wall fragility. So my contention is the spike protein landed on his endothelial cells that one way or another caused, some sort of reaction, and everything became inflamed, and and that decimated the endothelial cells of his aorta and caused the tear. I've seen articles by, Dr. McCullough, other people, that this is a likely possibility with the spike protein. It could also be the LNPs that, they could have, gathered in his adrenals. He could have had an adrenal surge, and that caused, the tear. So there are different mechanisms, and this is what I'm looking at. I'm having everything studied by different people, PhDs, whatever, but I know it was the vaccine. So after we have everything, and his tissue is going to be looked at also. So we're doing everything possible. And I just feel like, why am I the one that has to prove that it was the vaccine? You should be able to prove to me it wasn't. This is a healthy 34-year-old guy with no genetic predisposition that died 2 weeks after the vaccine when the antibodies were at the height. Why am I going crazy? You should be proving it to me that it wasn't. And of course, all of the FDA, the CDC, they're all like, oh no, this is safe and effective. One of the things I did after Victor passed away was I reported it to VAERS. Yeah. This was after I got off the couch, because I was like, in PTSD, and, this is my son. I'm able to talk about it, but most days I cry in the morning, I cry at night, and my mission is to get justice. But at any rate, I reported it to VAERS. I said, oh my God, this is a death. They should be calling me up within a day or two. What happened? Because they're supposed to be the ones that weren't we told that they were going to be the ones to monitor everything and make sure everything was okay? They didn't do anything. I called back hysterical, a couple of times. They finally, they took some notes, whoever answered the phone. I said, I want to speak to a doctor. I want to speak to a doctor. No doctors ever called me. Nobody called me. So what I did get were, after two separate calls, two separate condolence letters. So sorry for your loss. And the vaccine is safe.
Hold on. Who was the letters from?
The CDC.
Okay.
The CDC. And it's actually, I have an article from the Children's Health Defense that I did way back when, and you can actually see the letters in there. It's online. So, I felt dismissed. I said, well, I felt like my son is gone. You don't care. You're telling me it's safe and effective, and you're telling me the resources I should go to get psychiatric help, So, all of this is horrific. Now, one of the things I wanted, so what did I do? I did an autopsy, I did genetics, I did the toxicology, I did the serum blood analysis, and I've done extensive research and spoken to top people in the field.
Sure.
The other thing I've done is I've looked extensively at theirs, and his particular lot is a toxic lot. You've probably heard that.
Oh, yeah.
In his particular case, it had over 2,000 adverse events and over
Wow.
37 or 38 deaths. I've seen some that have more. As a matter of fact, one of the people I used to work with, through the, I found out later her husband had an aortic dissection. Now, aortic dissections, for people that don't know, they're very rare. They're usually like 30 at most, 30 in a million, but that's usually for 60 and 70-year-olds. For a 34-year-old, it's probably like one in, 1, 2, or 3 in a million.
Sure.
At any rate, this particular friend of mine, his lot number had over 200 deaths.
Wow. All right. So I just want people to know we had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. We're back in business, and Henrietta's going to finish the story. So Henrietta, I'm just going to let you jump right back in.
All right. So I was talking about the toxic lots, and what I noticed when I looked at the VAERS, his lot, for example, was not concentrated in one state. You would think that they would send the same lot to the same state, and it was dispersed throughout the country. And I just wonder if that's just to avoid clustering, so people wouldn't realize as easily that this particular lot, for whatever reason, was toxic or had more adverse events than maybe the other one, which is one of the reasons why so many people have so many people don't have reactions or don't think they have reactions. And, maybe they got a good lot, or maybe they're different types of lots. We've heard that.
Well, we've heard also about saline,
Yeah.
and people getting saline. I don't know, again, if that is correct or not. I don't have that knowledge. I wish I did, because I would have got the saline one. And I know a lot of other people would have too, but regardless of that, we're hearing that also.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
So I don't know the reason why it was dispersed. Maybe there isn't anything nefarious, but it just makes me wonder. But regardless, there are some lots that have a much higher incidence of adverse events and deaths. And of course, you can say not every single adverse event is necessarily 100% the vaccine. But even if it's only out of 2,000, even if it's only 5, that should be enough to stop.
They pulled vaccines and drugs off the market when it's 10, 15, 20 deaths. Never mind, 200, 400, 600, even more than that. We do know that there's been way more than those numbers as far as deaths. So, it's a money-making game in my mind, and no one goes against it. You have these top government doctors, these top, the regular doctors are getting paid off. The insurance companies are paying off. This is going down the line. This is not just one person getting paid off. A lot of people are getting paid off to be quiet, to not say anything. And I am grateful, I know you are too, Henrietta, that there are some doctors and medical professionals in general that are speaking up, that are telling their stories, whether they're vaccine injured, whether they're not vaccine injured. And we need these people to keep this story going, because we know that the government, Democrats and Republicans, are trying to squash this. They don't care if it hasn't affected them. They could care less. They're worried about Ukraine. They're worried about all these other, issues that should be worried about. But I think people's lives are should be more worried about than all these other issues in America. So,
I think
told
that
us.
this is the seminal reason I'm going to vote. My vote will be for whoever speaks out against the vaccines, because I think I know many people that have lost loved ones because I'm in this, with these people. and many people that have lost, that are injured. So if we don't address it, what's going to happen down the line? They're not going to fix the problem. This is willful negligence, they don't, it's see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. And
Well, Henriette, I just want to jump in because you've been to Congress, you've been to Washington, you've been to Mississippi and made speeches about Victor and what happened to him, and told this story multiple times to many different people in the government. And it seems like the majority of them, except for a very, very small select few that you can count probably either on one hand or maybe two if you're lucky, are actually paying attention, even given this the time of day. Can you talk about your time in Washington and these other places as far as government areas that you've been to and told your story and how they've treated you in general?
Well, I mean, everybody is respectful. I mean, I've gone with React 19 to Washington. They organized it. I told my story to various, congressmen or staff members, their staff members. We were trying to get the vaccine put onto the VICP list so people that are injured can get compensation. They haven't done that yet. And that was I forget when we went, maybe in October. I've spoken to my local congressman, and I would encourage anybody that is either vaccine injured, has lost somebody, or even if they just really want to see something happen in Washington, that they go to their local congressman. Because one of the things that when we spoke to Senator Ron Johnson, one of the things he said is that most of his peers don't even realize there's an issue because people aren't going to them to tell them there's an issue. So people need to speak up and tell, not necessarily that the congressman will do anything, but they can no longer say, well, we never heard of this or we don't know about it. Because one of the things that, has to happen is they have to repeal the blanket immunity.
Correct.
We have no recourse. This was willful misconduct. They knew that there would, from the clinical trials, they knew. I mean, there were over 1,200 deaths just in the clinical trials. They had all these adverse events. They have 9 pages of different,
Side
adverse
effects, right?
reactions. Yeah. So they knew. And as you said before, in the past, they would stop the vaccine. There was a monetary interest to keep this vaccine going. That's why they suppressed all the different therapeutics that worked. One of the things that really floored me was when I went to Mississippi. This was to stop the shots. One of the local doctors there had treated over 10,000 people for COVID. He treated them with a combination of ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and whatever else the protocol was. Not one of those people died. We didn't need the vaccine. We had the therapeutics, and we could have saved most people, unless they were very, very, very elderly or had a lot of comorbidities. Was just the therapeutics we had. You don't kill people to save people,
Yeah,
and this is what they've done, So I don't believe the vaccine. I don't believe that the vaccine is safe. I know it's not safe. It wasn't effective. They never even tested for efficacy, and they kept saying it was effective. And we all fell for it. And so anyway, so everybody's been very people are trying. It's just that you can't, unless the media is with you, it's hard to get through.
I want to just bring this up, and not to dabble into politics, and you don't have to, give an opinion, or you can give an opinion if you want on this. I'm usually in Florida. I'm not there at the moment, but that's where I'm registered to vote. That's where I live for the most part. We have a governor that is standing up. He's putting a grand jury out there, and God knows what's going to happen. Hopefully good things. I believe there will be some good things to happen. Whether anything takes place, I don't personally believe. I know there's people that think that Dr. Fauci is going to get arrested. I think that's very far-fetched. I'm for this, but I think it's far-fetched. But I think we can do a lot of things to, change the atmosphere in Florida, and hopefully that'll hit a bunch of other states. There's also Brevard County, Florida. I'm not sure if you heard this, but their Republican Party in the county is pushing the governor right now, just wrote a letter to Tallahassee to say, we need to get the shots off the shelves. No more shots, period. If you live in Florida, you cannot get this shot. I think if that happens too, that's a big thing in Florida, and that's a big thing for people on the country to see a person running for president of the United States that would do that if he does do that. RFK Jr. speaks for himself. I mean, that's a man who I'm voting for. I stayed registered as a Democrat. I was going to change. Because I've had enough of the nonsense going on in the Florida Democratic Party and the Democratic Party in general. But I stuck around because this is a man I think is intelligent. I agree with his politics of his family. I agree with him in what he's speaking about in the environment, on glyphosate, on vaccines and COVID in general. And I think we need a man like that, or Governor DeSantis, if he keeps putting these things in play that are being pushed towards his way. Again, if you don't want to answer this, you're more than welcome to divert to something else.
No,
But
I'll answer. I actually went to Dartmouth, and RFK was there. This was for there were, I forget, there was like about 5 or 6 speakers there. Koldorf was there.
Okay.
Brooke Jackson was there. There were a few speakers, and it was easy for me to get up there. And then RFK actually was a last minute addition, and I met him. I spoke to him. I'm impressed with his stance, and it's not. He's been doing this for a long time. I mean, he's not.
Correct.
I mean, I hate when people say anti-vaxxers. Because, what does that mean? I mean, you can
Well, your son, Victor, got the vaccine. I got the vaccine.
we all got the vaccine.
We all got the vaccine.
But does that mean we have to go blindly into all these vaccines? We have to start looking at all of them and determining, are they really safe? I don't believe the COVID vaccine is safe, but, the others can also be looked at, at some point. I just, I feel like I'm writing a sign: critical thinker equals anti-vax. I don't know, something like that.
Well, as a person that, is an intelligent person like yourself, we all have learned as young students in high school, even before that in grammar school, that, science is a thing that changes. We should be looking at the science. If we're truly looking at the science, we should be able to have debates. We should be able to say, I agree with this, you agree with that. Let's have the analysis come out in the full reports. Yeah, go ahead.
Because one of the things I hated was everybody afterwards was saying, well, I follow the science. I said, well, great. But science, as you said, changes. That's the whole point. You have to
Henrietta, just to interject, it's not the science if you're not looking at the data that's saying that it's murdering people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, let's just be real honest with each other. I mean, that's the way the cookie crumbles. And I'll tell you what, it's really sad that we've come to a place in this country. And I want to end with the last few talking points with this, with just for me personally, I was a very leftist liberal, Bernie Sanders person. People will, tell you how I was. I would call on radio stations all over the country, and a lot of people knew who I was. Regardless of that, during 2020, I was watching CNN 24/7 and wearing 2 or 3 masks, riding a bicycle in Florida. We can all laugh and get kicks out of it now, but I still see people doing that. And I had a girlfriend that laughed, and I said, listen, can't laugh at these people. We got to figure out some way to get to these people, because when they try this again, whether it's with some sort of pandemic, whether it's with some sort of climate change initiative, whatever it is, we have to be able to say, hey, listen, I understand. I was there. I was with you. I was in the cultish atmosphere. I was in the liberal hysteria. And I came out of it only due to an injury that, I don't even know if it's going to get cured or not. So that's the way we have to talk to these people.
And that's what bothers me, that, this should not be political, because people,
I agree.
are affected whether they're Democrats or Republican.
Correct.
And you shouldn't just align yourself with, oh, the vaccine is safe because
Right.
all of, your cohorts believe that. Or on the other side, you could say the same thing. So it's just become something that it should never have become. And I see it, I mean, I hate to put it this way, but my friends that are on the Republican side, believe me.
Yeah. No, you're
My
right.
friends on the Democratic side don't necessarily believe me. They may sympathize with the fact I lost my son. They're empathetic for that, but they may not believe it was the vaccine because something in them keeps them from, because after all, if they got it and they can't accept the fact that they made a mistake, or if they took their
Right.
children to get it, and they possibly put their children in danger, I think it's just, blinders that they put on. I don't want to go there. I don't want to look at it. So let's just keep with the safe and effective. I'm okay. My kids are okay. So everything's fine, and it's unfortunate what happened to Victor, but it wasn't the vaccine. Well, absolutely. It was the vaccine, 100%. And as a matter of fact, one thing I don't even know if I should want to say is that I'm going to give you a definition. You're going to tell me what you think this is.
Okay.
If you intentionally or recklessly cause the death of another person, or under circumstances evincing depraved indifference to human life, someone recklessly engages in conduct which creates a grave risk of death and thereby causes death. To me, this sounds exactly like what happened to us.
Yeah.
They knew, they put it out there with bold-faced lies. They were reckless. Well, this is the definition of second-degree murder in New York State. Nobody talks about that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I have a good friend. He was an injured, but he never got the vaccine. He was berated in New York City. He lives right in the city. He's an actor over there. And he had to get a fake vaccine card to work. And he told me, he said, I knew something was wrong when they shut down the gyms. Well, I knew something was wrong when we couldn't walk outside and exercise even outside. That I'm sure you've heard these stories. They shut down the basketball courts. They filled in the skateboard parks. If you wanted to go on the beach, you couldn't do it. And that's when, a lot of us, like me, I was a poli-sci major, and I'm huge into politics. I just talked to you how big I was and stuff. And at the time, I didn't know this, but I was brainwashed from college and, even on past that. And I'm watching CNN 24/7, wearing 2 or 3 masks, riding my bicycle in 95-degree heat, and scared to death because they say if you're near somebody, you could drop dead any 10 seconds. And the fear factor of scariness was at an extreme level for people in general. And, I commend the people that were some way escaped that. They were not in that fear factor.
I honor
God
those
bless them.
people. I totally wish I had, it wasn't even the courage because I just thought, well, if the FDA is saying this, it must be true
We
because
all had trust in the government
yeah,
organizations.
well,
I
I
mean,
don't
we were
trust the
told,
government.
no,
I don't trust the medical system. I don't trust the doctors. I've lost
right.
trust in everything. And that's the sad part. We've lost
Yeah.
the trust.
Well, I told you I have medical trauma. I don't trust the doctors. I don't trust any of these people. They've laughed at me. They've told me to get a third shot when I had an adverse event after two. They try to push you on depression and anxiety pills. It's really disgusting. And I know people, women rather, 28, 29 years old, they were athletes in college. They were powerhouses, and now they're in bed and they got vaccine injured. They put them on depression pills. They didn't know any better, and they're screwed for life right now. And it's just really sad because it's the death and destruction as you and your family faced, and these people that are injured for either life or God knows how long, and they either can't work, they struggle to work, they struggle to work out. It's disgusting. And no one wants to help. No one wants to take any responsibility except for, again, the handful of people And, God knows the pressure that they're even under. People like Robert Kennedy Jr., people like Ron Johnson, people like Ron DeSantis, the pressure that they're under because they're standing up against other politicians, against big pharma, against some of the richest people in our society. And God willing, we pray that they don't cave. Well, I'm really grateful that you came on the program, Henriette, and I hope this isn't the last time we speak. And we're going to have a great interview coming up right after you that people will listen to. But I'll tell you what, keep the fight. We need people like you. Your son, obviously, even though he's passed, he needs you to keep fighting. I need you to keep fighting. We all need people like you to keep fighting because somebody, again, has to take responsibility for what happened the past 3 years. And I'm not even talking about the death and the destruction of people's bodies. I'm talking about the lockdowns. I'm talking about making a disease out of a lab. I mean, this is really sick, CRAP in plain
Yes,
English. And,
yes,
we have to stand up and fight because if we don't, and we just lay down and say, oh, poor that person, poor Henrietta, poor Rob, life goes on. And, it's somebody else's problem because it didn't happen to me. And you know what? Those are the people that when it comes again, and then maybe it'll affect them, we're going to say, unfortunately, we told you so.
exactly.
I
And
hate to
I'm
be
going to
like
keep
that.
fighting because this is my mission. My mission is to get justice for my son.
Right.
I know it's going to take a long time, but I want to see criminal prosecutions at some point. It's going to take a long time, but I know my son would have been taking up the banner if this had happened to me or my husband or his brother or sister, because that's the type of person he was. He always, he would not have let this go. And I just can't be a mother that just, I could, I grieve all the time, but I just
Yeah.
can't. I have to fight for him because I mean, it's the only thing that I can do at this point because at this point he's gone. So I have to find justice for him some way. And hopefully, with people like you doing these kind of things
Right.
and other people, eventually the tide will turn. And I hope so. But thank you so much for this interview.
Henrietta, thanks so much. And again, do you have any kind of social media where people can maybe follow your journey through this or
The only and this is very ironic because I've never been on Facebook or anything like that. The only thing I just did join about a few months ago Twitter, and
okay,
so I don't tweet that often, but it's called Victor's Voice 2, I think it is.
okay.
So yeah, and occasionally I'll put things on there, but yeah, that's
That's
all.
fine. Victor's Voice too. Everybody can spell that, find it, follow it. Again, the more light we bring on to stories like Victor's, like my own, then the more we can, really hopefully get the message out that this is not just hurting people with injury, but it's also murdered people. And we have to get justice for the people that were murdered and the people that have injuries due to this. So again, Henrietta, stay in the fight. Thank you so much for coming on. And again, I love to have you on again down the road. I think it's
Anytime,
important. All right. Thanks so
anytime.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Got my COVID-19 vaccination, and here's why. This isn't about gimmicks or sentiment or what commercial I like. This is about facts. COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. Millions of doses have already been given in the United States, and these vaccines have the most intensive safety monitoring in U.S. history. People from different races, ages, genders, and ethnicities participated in large clinical trials around the world to make sure this vaccine worked for all kinds of people. The amount of time and effort dedicated to developing these vaccines was huge. Scientists used existing research and technology so they could get the vaccines developed quickly and safely without skipping any steps. If you need any more information, use a reliable source like the CDC website to get the facts.
We are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am not a practicing physician. I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that understanding of medicine science is consistently evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of the show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this publication. Thank you.